Can everyone please take your seats? There will be an opportunity after the panel to talk with all the astronauts at the outside the auditorium on the foyer. So please take your seats. Thank you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start this panel discussion. So please, one more time, take your seats. I would like to invite a very special man, Mr. Masoud Chicheka, who is the EMA for Lockheed Martin, who will be the moderator for this panel. Thank you.
Monseigneur, Excellence, Madame Ambassador Maggie Macquarie-Doyle, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Pioneers and Innovators of Our Time panel. Before we start, again, let me also wish you Thanksgiving to our guests. Flew from 1,000 miles away, leaving their families just to be with us tonight, and thank you for doing that. Happy Thanksgiving. I think we all enjoyed and thrilled with the scenes that we saw in the movie. And here there are some of the heroes really accomplished all these incredible tasks that I was thrilled to see them during the movie. Great accomplishments. We have really some great innovators and very courageous people on the stage. Let me start with order on my left. First, Captain Robert Gibson, 5 space shuttle flights, 36 plus days in space, 1 time as pilot and 4 times commanding the shuttle vehicle. He spent more than 36 days in space. He has also some other skills, like he flew more than 14,000 hours on 157 different aircraft as pilot under his control. And I'm told he's a musician, he plays guitar. Then second, Dr. George Nelson. He accomplished 3 shuttle missions. He spent a little more than 17 days in space. He did 2 spacewalks and coming up to a little more than 16 hours in space outside of the shuttle vehicle. We call this EVA, extravehicular activities, spacewalk. He now is in academic circles. He is passing all his experience, his teaching, astrophysics and social studies in a number of U.S. universities. And our woman panelist on the panel, Dr. Rhea Shedden, woman of many firsts. She's astronaut, 3 shuttle missions, 30 plus days in space. He has really very impressive skills being besides being astronaut, surgeon, pilot, healthcare executive, entrepreneur, author, and public speaker. Very unique to this panel, Dr. Ray Seddon, married to Captain Gibson. And she's the mom of 4 astronautes. Then at the center of the stage, Mr. Charles Bolden, 4 space shuttle missions. 2 times he piloted and 2 times acted as commander, controlling, flying the shuttle and commanding it. Some 28 plus days in space. And more importantly, after his missions, he became NASA administrator, meaning #1 person in NASA organization. You saw the movie, all those good things, that's what NASA did. He was leading NASA efforts between 2009 and 2017. They have so many accomplishments. If I tell them, we're going to spend a few hours, so these are the few things that I collected. Actually, they achieved more. Mr. Michael Lopez Alegria, 4 missions, 3 with Space Shuttle and 1 serving International Space Station Expedition 14 mission as commander. He spent a total of 258 days in space, which 215 of them it was at international space stations. And he holds the NASA record of 67 hours and 40 minutes of EVA. 67 hours, 40 minutes total space walking time. Well, Mr. Guy Beetleshise, he is the representative of aerospace industry. He is the Vice President for Communication Satellite Solutions at Lockheed Martin Space System Company. 30-plus years experience and 17 years of them at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, where he served key roles on the Mars missions, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, Mars Odyssey Orbiter, and Mars Pathfinder. And our last panelist, Dr. Aygun, he is the President and CEO of Space Systems International, Monaco-Sat. One of the real pioneers of satellite communications in Europe. He played key roles for the creation of TurkSat in the late 80s, early 90s, EurasiaSat, AzerSat, and lately Monaco-Sat, which was launched April 2015 for Monaco. No surprise, he was awarded recently the Officer of Ordre de Saint-Charles de Monaco. Congratulations. Well, after this introduction, I think we can start our panel. Can we? Great. I thought, what would be the most interesting and appealing question for you to ask our pioneers and innovators of our time to give us a little bit excitement? And the question I'd like to ask them, which is the same question for all of you, I'll ask you to answer, please, in order. What was the most memorable moment in your space life to date? I would like to start with Captain Gibson, please.
Well, it's a little difficult to pick one because of 5 missions. There were so many memorable events, but I guess I'll have to pick one, and that would be that I did the first docking ever done by a space shuttle. And it was with the Russian space station Mir. And my crew and I had to attempt, underline the word attempt, to learn to speak Russian because I am an engineer. I'm good with math and physics and science, but languages? I are not good at languages. And so here's what I know best in Russian. Я говорю по-русски очень плохо и понимаю ничего. I speak Russian very badly and understand nothing. But this was a fascinating mission because we did the very first docking ever done by a space shuttle. And I got to dock with the Russian space station Mir. And it's one of those fascinating piloting challenges because rendezvous and docking in the space shuttle is manually flown by the commander. So I was able to fly the approach to the Russian Mir space station, dock with the station, and then the protocol was when we got there that the two mission commanders would shake hands. So in the photo we had just a moment ago, I'm shaking hands with the commander of the Mir space station, Russian Air Force Colonel Vladimir Dezhurov, who had been a Russian fighter pilot training to shoot me down, while I had been an American fighter pilot training to shoot him down. And after this handshake, the President of the United States announced that day that that handshake marked the end of the Cold War. So now you all know I ended the Cold War.
Dr. Nelson, please.
Again, like Hoot, it's hard to find one thing. All three of my space launches were incredibly exciting and terrifying. But probably the moment that sticks out most for me is that on my first mission, I got to do an untethered space flight outside. You can see in the picture there, I'm flying. I flew about 60 meters or so from the space shuttle over to this satellite and attempted to attach myself to the satellite, ended up wrestling with the satellite, and the satellite won in this case. But it's an incredible experience to be your own spacecraft, have no tethers, and to fly off and to look. I had trained myself halfway to the satellite to take my hands off the controls and relax and look around and to take the scene in as a human being, to have the Earth underneath you going by at 17,000 miles an hour, a spacecraft behind you, a satellite in front of you, and just say, I can't believe I'm really here. We did get the satellite back then, and we were able to do the first on-orbit satellite repair as both to fix the satellite to demonstrate to the Soviet Union at the time that we could capture satellites out of the air, and to prepare the work that we used to repair the Hubble Space Telescope.
Thank you. Dr. Seddon, please.
Yes, I have to tell you that some of my most exciting space adventures were on the ground, not necessarily in space, because I was one of the first 6 women astronauts they took in 1978 in the first class that were to fly the space shuttle. And here we are, and then doing that, I met my husband, my colleague at NASA, Gibson, and we were married, which was a real surprise to NASA. And even more of a surprise was when we began producing astronautes. But I was assigned to a shuttle mission shortly thereafter. I had been an astronaut spouse on my husband's first flight. So here is our crew, and we're about to go to space. And one of the most important things that we did on that mission was to launch this satellite. And it came out of the cargo bay. We turned it on. We sent it in space. And we found that it wasn't performing correctly. And so we had to separate it away from it. We thought it was a dead satellite. Mission Control says, we think you can go rendezvous with that and perhaps turn it on. Turn a switch on the side. So how are we going to do that? We ended up having to put some things that looked like fly swatters on the end of the robot arm. And here it is. We're about to go over and try to hit a little switch on the side. We made sure that that switch was in the on position. Unfortunately, it was not what the problem was, and my colleagues had to go up later and rewire the thing. But my second two missions were Space Lab missions, a laboratory that sat in the back of the shuttle cargo bay. And here we are doing many important things to help figure out how humans adapt to weightlessness so people could go into space for longer periods of time. Of course, you always hope that you have as many landings as you have takeoffs. And here is my final landing. And waiting for me there on the ground was a very important person in my life at the time. The second of our astronautes, this is Dan at 4 years old, and there I am in Colombia coming home. So it was a wonderful career to have many exciting moments.
Of our crewmates who are not here with us. One of them is Dr. Steve Hawley, who's back in Kansas. And so, as everybody has said, it's hard to pick a most memorable time, but I thought I would share a particular time with you on my second flight in space, and we talked in the movie a lot about Hubble. You can't see it very much, but that's the Hubble Space Telescope in the payload bay just prior to Dr. Steve Hawley operating the mechanical arm, reaching down, grabbing it, and the way we had trained, it was supposed to be a very simple process to just lift it out of the payload bay, and immediately as he started moving it, we noticed that it wasn't coming straight out the way it was supposed to, and that began what was about a half hour to an hour of me reading individual joint angles off to Steve and him having to do joint by joint maneuver the shuttle, the Hubble Space Telescope out of the payload bay. We had other problems that caused us to have to think that we were going to have to do a spacewalk. As a pilot, I wasn't going to do it, but my job was to put my two crew members, Kathy Sullivan and Bruce McCandless, in the spacesuits. We put them in the airlock and took the airlock down to vacuum in preparation to have them go out and actually mechanically wind out one of the solar arrays that didn't work when we finally figured out what the problem was, so they didn't have to go out. The bad part was that meant they also missed the deployment because they were locked in the airlock and did not see what they had anticipated for most of their astronaut careers, and they have not forgiven me to this day.
Thank you.
So I agree that it's very challenging to pick a moment. I think all of us would agree that the moment of launch, whether on the space shuttle or I was fortunate enough to do it on the Soyuz, is incredibly overwhelming psychologically, physiologically, in every respect. The landings on the space shuttle, anyway, are super smooth. It's like a commercial airline. On my last mission, I flew to space with a person who sort of began to change my life in the moment that I'm going to describe. It was related to her. She was an Iranian-born American businesswoman who became one of the first tourists to fly to space. And I wasn't very keen on the idea because I'm a steely-eyed test pilot. I didn't want, people getting in our way. But during the training, and especially on orbit, she was a consummate professional. She did everything that she was supposed to do, nothing she wasn't supposed to do. She took fantastic pictures. But she was doing this thing called blogging. This is 2006, and she was reaching hundreds of thousands of people who otherwise would not care about human spaceflight. And I began to absorb this idea of democratizing access to space. So there are 5 people on the stage and several others in the audience who are one of the 560 people in the totality of humanity that have been to space, and that number is too small. So this is Anusha as we floated around in September of 2006, and I began to really believe in this idea and in commercializing access to space to allow more people to be able to feel this. And this launch of SpaceX Falcon Heavy was impressive, but the moment most memorable was the simultaneous landing of these 2 boosters, which I was literally had tears in my eyes when I watched this. And I believe that this is going to usher in a new era of getting more people to space so we can all share this feeling of the overview effect that astronauts talk about and make the world a better place. Thanks.
Thank you.
So I need to talk to the person who put me on after a bunch of astronauts, because I am not an astronaut and I have no stories that are even going to compare to going into space. So I've made most of my career building robots to go into space and explore other planets. And I was blessed to be the chief engineer for a Mars lander that landed on Mars in 2008 called Mars Phoenix. And here's a picture. We were coming in, and I think it really captures the spirit of NASA exploring the unknown. So if you look in the little box there, you can see it kind of blown up. That's us. That's our little robot on a parachute. So it's entered the atmosphere slowed it down. About 1,200 kilometers above there, we deploy the parachute. Meanwhile, 700 kilometers away, we have another Mars orbiter going around the planet with a really nice camera. And so we slewed that camera over and caught a picture of us descending to the surface of Mars on that parachute. So don't worry, we didn't land in the crater. It wasn't a hole-in-one. But we did come in and land safely that day. And if we go to the next picture, you'll see that the payoff is when you get to the surface of Mars and you get to see that panorama. And I do want to kind of throw it out that everybody in the audience can participate a little bit in this, because on Monday we're gonna land another Mars lander onto the surface of the red planet. So a NASA mission managed by the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the lander built by Lockheed Martin, and the two premier instruments, one from the German Space Agency and one from the French Space Agency. So a real example of international cooperation. So 9 p.m. on Monday here at Monaco time. Take a look and wish us luck for landing on the red planet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mesut. We work mainly on the ground, preparing the satellites, designing the satellites to be launched with our friends in the old times. Before I go into the good things, I want to say my first experience. We were trained with several universities, became the satellite engineer, designer. I designed the first satellite, 5 years of work, 5 years of design, testing day and night. We went to the French Guiana. Maybe the photos, it will come later. You stay here. We went to the French Guiana with Ariane. We start the launch. I was in the control. And then we see in our panels and the computers what is going on, projection. And then the satellite and the launcher goes there and then went back to the ocean. This was a disaster for my first mission, but by God, we foresee that one, and I bought, instead of one satellite, 2 satellites. And the second satellite was on ground ready. So 3 months after, I saw Mesut working in Arianespace, and he became the mission manager of Arianespace, and he launched my second satellite successfully. Right? But I want to say my most memorable one is the Monaco Sat-1. This is our satellite, and you may see that the launch of SpaceX. Actually, on those times, most of the European manufacturers didn't believe the SpaceX success, but we were the one of the first one launching the SpaceX. And I should thank to the Monaco, all the Monaco team, government, but mostly to our Monseigneur. Thank you giving us these opportunities and having the Monaco in the space and in the Space Club. Thank you.
Now we can get into real discussion and dialogue right now after your memorable moments. I chose a few topics. As you know, we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of NASA. And when we look back, what do you see? Today, private sector is ambitiously, they want to take some of the missions, they want to contribute, they want to take the loads from the NASA's shoulders. Especially they want to play significant roles in space exploration. And the questions I'd like to ask you, what are the advantages and disadvantages? And as we all know, space doesn't have any mercy and very risky. What about the safety issue in general, especially for the human element? I'd like to start this dialogue with Mr. Bolden, please. And then I ask, please, every single panelist to chip in to forward their opinions.
What have we learned when we look back? The beautiful thing about watching Above and Beyond the video is it showed you the journey. So if we look back, we see how we had fits and starts, we had successes and failures. And what we learned from the past is that the last thing you can do is be afraid of failure. And you cannot let failure deter you, or you will never get to the goal that you pursue. So that's sort of a lesson from the past, and it's something we should always remember. You also asked about what's good and what's bad. I don't see anything bad about the future. I will echo what L.A. said about the advent of what we call in America commercial spaceflight, where NASA is parlaying its partnership with industry, with academia, with entrepreneurs, and most of all, with our international partners in enabling us to do the kinds of things that NASA is supposed to do, which is go beyond low Earth orbit, be out front in everything, take the risks, do the daring things until we have been able to kind of make it commonplace, if ever, but so we can hand it off to the private sector. And I think that's what we've done pretty well when you look at how we get the cargo to space today. NASA doesn't have any launch vehicles anymore. We don't transport anything to space. We buy the service. And next year, hopefully if SpaceX launches successfully on the 7th of January, their test flight, you'll see the first commercial crew vehicle in space, not with a crew yet, but if that's successful, then sometime next year you'll see the first commercial crew vehicle that'll begin to take people to space. And that's the future, and that's what I'm really excited about.
So we should be encouraged, what you're saying.
I'm saying you should be every bit encouraged. And for the young people over here that I had an opportunity to talk to, or the ones down here, particularly the young women, forget about the guys. Just move. And, we need for people to learn the lessons of the past, but really stay focused on the future and do what you know you want to do and what you can do. Ask, because people don't go up and give you things, but ask for what you want, be prepared for it, and then don't be afraid of failure. Don't let anybody define you. Don't let them tell you what you can or cannot do.
I'll add something to what Charlie just said. Charlie just referred to women and young women. And, okay, we only have one female astronaut up here on the stage with us today, but the American Astronaut Corps is extremely close to being 50% female. 50% male and 50% female.
I'd like to add also onto what Charlie said, but to talk about the notion that it's always been the role of government to expand the frontier. So we saw the Catholic kings of Spain financed Columbus to go discover what ended up being the New World. And once the place is safe and the risk is reduced, then it's time to allow commerce, to allow people to go there and begin trading and one day settling, etc. So that's sort of what's happening today in low Earth orbit. Humans have been going with various government programs for 60 years almost, and we're getting pretty good at it. It's never going to be easy, and it's never going to be without risk, but now the government is aiming deeper into space, somewhere around the vicinity of the moon, and one day onto Mars or the moon of Mars. And it's taking its resources and putting it into development of vehicles that will be able to do that. And in the meantime, companies like SpaceX and Boeing and Northrop Grumman with their commercial cargo vehicles are enabling commerce to begin in low Earth orbit. And not only do we need transportation, but we need a destination there. So I think that I'm very encouraged about the future. I think that safety is always going to be number one. I have full confidence that NASA is not going to let its astronauts get on vehicles that are not safe. And so what I see now is, again, multiplying this number from 500 to 5,000 to even bigger as we go on.
I have to speak just a little bit as a scientist, because I think one of NASA's major roles in the past has been research and development, not just on vehicles and propulsion systems and engineering, but on doing research on people in space, on what we can do with the benefits of space, the vacuum, the weightlessness. And so I hope that beyond just commercialized vehicles and things going to space, that we will continue at NASA in particular, but for other companies, to begin and continue doing research and development in space in the scientific fields.
Dr. Nelson?
So I don't have a lot to add, but on the safety side of things, as Charlie said, you shouldn't be afraid of failure. One of the things I actually worry about with the commercial side and with the broad spectrum of programs that we've got going now, that you work as hard as you can not to have a failure, but eventually you're going to have to accept the risk that you have and fly. And what is really necessary, I think, is to think through ahead of time, what are you going to do when you fail? And because there will be failures. And so I think the system and the individual players need to have that plan up front. What are we going to do when we fail? We're not going to quit. We have a plan to continue on, that we're not going to let a failure stop us.
Thank you.
I'd also like to add that because of the commercialization of space and the fact that technology has gotten to the point where private companies can now look at how are they going to make money out in space, how can they do commerce in space. And I think it's a great example that now NASA can do more because now they have other partners that they can go with. They have these private companies that are now doing things. So for commercial crew, getting astronauts up and down to the spacecraft, up and down to the space station, now means that NASA can really apply more resources to going beyond low Earth orbit. So right now we're building Orion for NASA to take astronauts further than they've ever been before, out to the moon and eventually to Mars and bring them back safely. If only NASA were responsible for getting astronauts up and down to low Earth orbit, they wouldn't be able to take some of those resources and continue to expand the frontiers of exploration and what we can do as humanity.
Thank you. Now I want to take the advantage of having an astronaut couple at the panel. I want to ask two questions to Dr. Ray Seddon and Captain Gibson. You are free to answer. Which one to start? How is to be married to an astronaut?
Well, most of the time it was very good. But I think each of us had to accept the role not only of the person that was flying in space, but the astronaut spouse. We have a couple of astronaut spouses here, Pinky Nelson's wife, Susie, and Charlie's wife, Jackie, who know what it means, to be the person that stays home. Astronaut spouses have many formal duties and a lot of things to do, welcoming families and visitors that come to the launch. So it is a very busy time, but it is a learning experience, and we all became very close when you were spouses together. And so I think it was nice that my husband had to be a spouse. We used to call them the astronaut wives until people like Hoot were not a wife. He was a spouse. So we were the astronaut spouses after that. I think Steve Hawley was the first non-wife to be a spouse. But that was an evolution of learning how astronaut spouses would be in the role of supporting the others.
Well, and I can be a little even more specific than that, and that is that, Mesut, it was very easy to be on the crew. You trained to go, you're so very focused on what you're doing when you're getting ready to launch that I have to admit, you're not really thinking about your family as you're sitting on the launch pad counting down, ready to go. You have spent as much time with them in the last couple of weeks leading up to launch. But when you're the spouse, standing on the ground and watching your wife go, I have no problem whatsoever when I launch. I'm not nervous. My heart isn't beating fast. I'm focused on the job. When I have to stand there and watch my wife launch to space, my heart is beating about 140 beats per minute. My hands are all sweaty, and I have tears in my eyes. It's not easy to watch your wife be in that kind of position of risk, that kind of excitement, and it's a bittersweet experience. You are so excited for her to be going to space, and at the same time, you are so nervous because of the risk involved in it. So it's a very moving experience, and it puts tears in our eyes.
Actually, that was going to be my second question. You answered partially, but I want to give the chance also Dr. Ray Seddon to say a few words about that. Knowing the risks and risks associated with that kind of a mission, you know what is involved. When one goes to the mission, to space, the other one stays behind. How are the feelings on both sides? And from the human side, I'm always wondering, like yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I'm sorry, I took the flight from Brussels to here. We live in an environment, you never know what happens to you next. I hugged my two sons and hugged my wife, said goodbye. I'm coming to Nice, to Monaco, and you're going to space. So how are the feelings? Tell us a little bit, please. We heard from you. Now I want to ask Dr. Seddon.
I think that, on my first flight, I had you go into a quarantine, so you don't see your family in the last week. So I had to say goodbye to my young son, who didn't really understand what was happening, but he understood the seriousness with which I said that goodbye, and it is a bit scary. And of course, when we were first flying, we thought everything would always be okay. And I think after the Challenger accident, we realized that you need some preparation ahead of time when you leave your family behind. They need to know where you parked the car. They need to know where the important papers are. You have to be standing there, when you launch. Your spouse needs to be standing holding their hand. So it does fill you with emotion when you leave the family behind. But when you're dedicated to the missions the way we were, and having trained as much as we had, I think all of us weighed the risks and benefits and decided that we would fly. And that's what we all did.
Thank you.
Let me add one more thing. And we get the question all the time, Hoot or Ray, did you ever fly with your spouse in space? Did you ever go together? And the joke I like to tell is, okay, as Mesut mentioned, I flew 4 times as the mission commander. And so if Ray had been there on my crew, I could have said something like, Ray, it's time to open the sun shields. And she would say, you want the sun shields open, you can just go open them yourself. Don't try and pull this mission commander stuff on me. So it wouldn't have worked, so we never did fly together.
Well, thank you being honest with us. Thank you. Well, let me go to the next topic. I'm going to come back this little human-oriented questions in between the topics. I know I'm looking to my time. We have some, I think, a little less than 20 minutes. I want to cover 2 more topics. The next one is, in June 2006, Prince Albert Foundation has been established to address our planet's alarming environmental issues. Foundation is dedicated to the protection of sustainable development on a global scale. Some of the principal domains of actions are to limit the effects of climate change and promote renewable energies, to safeguard biodiversity, oceanography-related research, and to manage water resources and combat desertification. How do you think international space community may help those issues and collaborate with this wonderful foundation?
I found it very interesting during the period of time we've been here when I think I heard 127 nationalities here inside the Principality. That number rang with me because NASA has more than 120 active international partnerships spanning about 800 active international agreements, many of them dealing with the planet and trying to preserve the planet such that it will always be a vibrant place for us to live. NASA's vision, as a matter of fact, is to reach to new heights, to reveal the unknown so the things we learn and know will make the world better for humanity. So I think there's a perfect match between what we as a space agency have done for 60 years and continue to do, and what the Prince and the Prince Albert Foundation are attempting to do, not just for this part of the world, but you need to understand you're a leader in the world. It always takes somebody who steps up and says, we need to do this. And the oceans are critical, absolutely critical. And it's the leadership of the Principality, the leadership of Prince Albert that brings people's attention to it. And for me personally, I've been really excited about what I've seen here, about learning about the satellites that you're producing, and even learning about the possibility, with SSI and Axiom joining hands now in an agreement to work together to see what else can be done in the future of commercial space. So I'm really excited about what we've heard and seen.
Thank you, Mr. Bolden. More comments?
One comment is that NASA can't do everything. What it can provide mostly is the data, the understanding of what's happening, what's out there, what's real, what's not. And also NASA has an incredible computational capacity, that's really important for modeling what's happening. But the real solutions have to be to take that data and to put it into the political realm, into the human realm, so that you take actions to mitigate. We aren't going to overcome climate change for a long time yet, but we can learn to mitigate, and we can work as hard as we can politically to take the best information we can gather from NASA and from other resources and integrate it into a real plan that revolves around real numbers, real data, to do the best we can politically. And that's where a foundation like the Prince Albert Foundation can have a really important role to play, not just in Monaco, but worldwide, in bringing the community together to act, because it's real. This is real, and it's going to impact us all, and especially you young people. And so it's very important that we move this issue of climate change to near the top of the list of actions we have to take. And that's that's a political action that foundations like the Prince Albert Foundation could lead. And it's important that they do.
Thank you. More comments?
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on this, the kind of idea of partnerships, because where the state of technology is, more and more players can actually do things in space. From, as we talked about, companies trying to make money out there, the fact that you can launch CubeSats now, so for relatively inexpensive, so universities and other small organizations can actually build working spacecraft and put them out there to do exciting things. And there's things that levels of science that we can do to understand our planet better that you can do with all of these assets. And so really where I think it comes down to is there's a whole wide list of opportunities of partnership out there. For instance, one of the things we're doing is we're building for NASA a carbon monitoring instrument called GeoCarb. Now, the interesting thing about this is 10, 20 years ago, this would be an entire NASA mission. We'd build the instrument, we'd build the spacecraft, NASA would pay for the launch vehicle, and it would all be there. And this time we're doing it differently. So NASA's building the instrument. They've got a university in our state of Oklahoma who's responsible for the science. And then we're just building the instrument, and then we're going to put it on a commercial communication satellite that's already going up. So we pay a fee that's much smaller than building a spacecraft on our own, or paying for the whole launch. And then the communication satellite provider gets a hosting fee, so they win. And then we get this satellite out into orbit, taking a look at the planet and monitoring carbon over North and South America in real time. And so it's really a win-win all around. And I really think that that's where Monaco, with their kind of unique position in the world, to be able to connect and really establish some of these partnerships between all of these organizations, government, academia, philanthropic organizations. And so it really is an exciting time to be in space, and it's really important that we learn more about our planet so we know how to take care of it and improve it for our generations beyond.
And in your opinion, Mr. Birushais, is industry playing its role as it is supposed to be in this?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity going on in industry right now, trying to find different ways that we can add value.
Like research and development budgets assigned accordingly to those things?
Yeah, so I really do think it, again, it comes down to we want to break, we want to take advantage of the fact that we don't have to be limited to just having NASA release a call for a proposal and do an entire mission. We want to be able to come to NASA and say, hey, we've got some partnership ideas. We've got some small startup companies out there. We've got a private foundation that wants to do more out there. We've got a school that wants to get involved and maybe play a role in providing hardware or actually providing students to actually operate the satellite. And I think it really is, we don't want to, as speaking for industry, we don't want to just be in the situation of just waiting for the government to tell us what to do. We want to play an active role in trying to create those kind of partnerships and create those kind of new missions that NASA can go, hey, that adds value. That's something that we want to take advantage of.
Please encourage our executive leadership team to do those things more. Dr. Eigen and Captain Alegria, I think you want to make some comments on that. Just please, 30 to 45 seconds duration comments, because I have to cover two more topics quickly.
No, after all this listening, of course, the applications and the future, thanks, I think, to the NASA again, where they have given most of the new future missions to the private companies, like for the launching of the satellites to the SpaceX, and the others are coming, but also for the space station. What I heard actually 2-3 months ago when we met with Captain Alegria, that the International Space Station lifetime will be end of 2025 or something, maybe plus minus 2-3 years. But then the NASA would like the private companies to invest or to operate, even to give such a service to the NASA or to the scientific communities, but even to the other countries, not a single state mission. So thanks to the Captain Alegria that we discuss a lot, that Axiom Space, a new
I could say maybe spin off from NASA. All the NASA genius top guys are working. Thanks to also, I think Charlie is also advising to this one. So I could announce that we have signed an MOU, an agreement with the Axiom and our company SSI Monaco, that we will propose candidates to be trained as astronauts. So from Monaco, of course, that's why I'm looking to the young guys, that the space is not only the US or the big countries' domain. So we can, with these private companies, also we can do something. So that's why I will, of course, ask Captain Allegria to give some more details. But the thing is, they will train the NASA standards, even the NASA astronauts, and I think 2 categories: professional, real astronauts, but also could be just kind of space tourists, but trained as an astronaut. So, but in the future, when the end of the space station close to the end of its lifetime, at the same time, they will send and put new modules to extend the existing one, and maybe in 2025 or after, just cut the link, and then the old one existing will drop down, and then they will continue with the new one. We should have all visionary. So why not to have a Monaco module for the space tourists or even the science? And I really appreciated to discuss with even Captain General Charlie that there could be many pharmaceutical or so many research can be done there. So this is just I want to say. Maybe Captain Allegra may say some more.
I know we don't have much time. But just to try to close this back to the original question about the Prince Albert Foundation, you know, some of the important work that's going on the ISS is clearly science, and Dr. Seddon mentioned all the continuing research in physiology that can only go on when we have humans on board. But I think a more grand idea is also to expand the family of nations that go to space from beyond 15 or 20. I think today the number of countries that have sent astronauts to ISS is 18. That's not even 10% of the countries. And if we want to do deep space exploration, we should probably do it internationally, representing the human race, not just one country or a handful of countries. And so this commercial or any space station is going to need researchers, it's going to need engineers, it's of course going to need pilots and operators. And in an opportunity to fly somebody from Monaco to space will also inspire this generation to study those science, technology, engineering, art, and math to be able to fulfill those roles. So somehow this is all tied together, and I think we're all very interested in stewardship of our planet, of taking care of it for the next and future generations, and be able to inspire a young Monaco resident to go to space. I think is a wonderful idea.
Thank you. We're approaching to the end of our panel. Just one little thing, and then we'll enter to the last topic, and we'll wrap up in 5 minutes. I want to share that maybe most of you watched the movie called Gravity. You know, George Clooney role. Actually, that was the character that played by George Clooney in that movie is Captain Allegria. But however, he's with us here. Thank God that he's here with us. The last thing is, well, let's close this panel with some issues dedicated to Monaco. And I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Aygun. We know that you were very instrumental creating a number of space programs, projects very successfully. number of satellites are in operation in different countries, in different programs. And you were leading the MonacoSat-1 activity. Now, tell us, what are the good things that you're planning to accomplish for Monaco in the near future?
Thank you, Mesut. Yes, I mean, launching satellites for me is easy, but it's risky. So we did it, at least. And thanks to the MonacoSat-1, we are successfully launched, successfully filling up the satellite. But you cannot stop when you have the satellite, when you fill up the satellite, when you have the users. Either you have to increase your capacity or you stop and you lose your customers. So that's why we already planned the MonacoSat-2 with the same collocated orbital position. And we have also, thanks to the Monaco government, that they participate to this new project as MonacoSat-2. So it will be a Monaco-Monegasque satellite. Hopefully, before the mid next year, we may conclude and start the manufacturing. And in, let's say, in 32 months' time, we could launch it. But this is not the same thing, but we have to bring some industry to the Monaco, I mean space industry. So we cannot build big factories because the factory of, I think, Lockheed or the Thales is bigger than all Monaco. But then we said that in the future, why not the nanosatellites? I mean the small ones, that 10 kilo and 2-3 cubic units. So we have just started a startup company for nano satellites that we will do it. But also I heard yesterday that one of our electrical car pioneers in the world, Gildo, is designing, Gildo Pastor, I don't know why did I say, is designing some, after designing the Venturi electrical cars, the most speedy car of the world, he got the records. He's designing now the moon rocker, I mean some jeep on the moon. So that's why I think we have to even look and develop what kind of industry in small, tiny Monaco, like the nano states, nano satellites type of things, what we can do. So we will not stop. Of course, we will continue. Thank you, Mesut.
Well, we came to the end of the panel. I'm honored to be here in front of you, before you, Monseigneur, Excellence, and Madam Ambassador, and our heroes here. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That was an amazing evening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'm sure you did. And that wraps up this evening's event. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, sorry, could one point to mention is that if you would like to have a moment and some questions, please remain in the auditorium for a moment, and then we can step out into the foyer area where some questions can be taken. And please wait until His Serene Highness has left the auditorium. Thank you.
I'd like to just let what I believe